Hey there.
Hey, how are you?
How are you? Good. How are you?
Good.
That's a different look.
I know. Oh, oh my gosh, you haven't seen me. So I had cut all my hair off and couldn't figure out how to do it because it was so short. I'm so used to long hair, so I ended up putting braids in my hair so that it would grow back. So it was starting to grow back. And I'm thinking I'm gonna put braids in it one more time because I wanted to get back to the original length that it was. But yes,
Process. It, it looks good. I mean, it does well. It does a nice thing with your face. It frames it very nice.
thank you. Thank you. This is my own due, something that I conjured up myself because I have no idea what I'm doing, but here we
Good
go.
look. That's. I just want to remind you. Remember, it's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I decided to talk about this. So we could say in recognition of. Did you look at the updated email? Did that make sense?
Yeah. Did you read my agreement to the sequencing and then the adding bi-monthly in the summer?
Yeah.
Okay. Hope I don't lose my voice.
What's going on, everyone?
Hello.
It's the WLS. He's in the house. Love that. I did up all by myself, by the way. WLS.
What's going on with everybody? How y'all doing today?
It's Seattle weather here in Colorado. It's overcast, foggy, and chilly.
Yeah. We just now started getting to the good weather out here. It's been sunny consistently, which feels great because it should have been this way for months already. But I'm not complaining.
Nor should you.
Not at all.
We have floods now.
And we had tornadoes, so.
Oh, geez, that's whoa.
Yeah. We've had two. I love the topic today that we're going to talk about. Therapists. You know, I think this is important.
It is.
You know, especially with how everybody's pushing therapy nowadays, which is amazing in itself. But
Yeah.
I think definitely people trying to figure out how to find the best fit for themselves. I think that's important. So
Right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne, I'm still waiting for you to address the elephant in the room. You still haven't said anything at all, and I beat you to it, which is extraordinary for me. So if you don't get this, don't blame me for the wrath that you're going to feel.
No, I love the hairstyle. Yeah. So I got this. I'm not gonna lie. I already saw it in pictures.
The
so
Mother's
yes,
Day
I love it.
thing.
Yeah,
You saw the Mother's Day picture, didn't you?
Yes, and I recognize it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Oh my
I knew where I was going right off the bat when she showed up on screen.
I don't think he's ever seen me with long hair. Because I cut all my hair off. I was telling him that I'm used to having long hair, and I cut it like all off, and I really love the short haircut. I mean, it looked really nice on me, but I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I love the length of it right now. I love that cut on you.
So, so what I'm gonna do is I had braids in my hair to let it grow back out. So I think I'm gonna do braids one more time to let it grow out the length that I'm used to.
Yeah.
And then I'll take the braids out. But yeah, it's growing back thick and everything. Listen to me talking to you guys like growing back thick and
right. Yeah.
And Leslie, Wayne and I did not have any conversations prior to this Instagram. We didn't speak. We didn't share thoughts.
Yeah.
Right. Hold on for a second, please. So, all I ask is to lock the dogs up in the room.
Simple
See,
thing.
and this is about men's mental health, right? I just asked for one thing. Give me an hour with the dogs locked up in a room. How hard is that?
Kids, what are you going to do?
No, it's not the kids. It's the adult.
That's even worse. That's bad.
Now, hey, who's on this live right now? Who's a man? He just called you kids. I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm
Yeah.
oldest. I'm the oldest one here. I'm entitled.
Oh my goodness. Come on in, guys. We usually give it about 5 minutes before we get started. So it's 7:02 now, so come on in. Tonight is going to be really great, guys. Well, every week I say that because every week is great. But what we're going to, because this is Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it would be a good idea to answer your questions and talk about the therapeutic process and what that looks like. Go through some definitions. A lot of people don't know what the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is. So I'm going to go through. This is going to be straight up about education, building awareness around what the therapeutic environment looks like, going over some research. Dr. Whiteman is going to add, his spiel on what that looks like for in the sports arena with athletes. Wayne is going to add his piece. And so this is really going to be great awareness building tonight. So if you guys have anybody that you think may benefit from this discussion, please invite them. Because again, we're going to talk about difference between individual versus group therapy. We're going to talk about confidentiality, limits to confidentiality. I get a lot of questions around confidentiality because a lot of people are resistant and guarded to going to therapy because they don't trust the environment. So what's confidential and what's not?
Yeah.
Right? What environments are you in where there's limits to confidentiality, right? We're going to talk about that because that's important to know so that you can know. And it's important to ask questions too.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes family and confidentiality.
Yeah.
Don't assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me, you just reminded me of something. I'm going to put that down here.
Yeah, confidentiality is huge. Yes, I'm looking forward to getting to that part because I don't even think that people even understand the reason people don't talk to people because they, like you just said, Dr. Whiteman, is that they don't trust. Like I'm gonna trust you with information that's very sacred to myself, and I'm just gonna open up to you. For what reason would I do that? Like I don't know you, like yeah, and people want to feel good about the information they share as well. They don't want to feel judged or, again, but that all goes into finding somebody who works for you. Because I know that right now, today, me being one of them, me being a coach, understanding that everybody today is a coach. Everybody can say they're a coach, whatever. So even in that process, you still got to be very careful with who you deal with. I always tell people always tell me, oh, you have to be a coach. I could be a coach. I say, by all means, please go do it. So then when you mess them up, they can come see me. Or somebody like me who can really do the work with them. So by all means, go out there and continue peddling snake oil to people. But you know what I mean? Like, go ahead. Like yeah. Because what people want to do is they want to, they want to come in and they feel like, like they don't understand like all the work that it takes to go into becoming this. And I actually was talking to somebody the other day who was talking about how people want to come in and get the ask you how you do it or how'd you get here. And then you give that to them. And then now they've skipped all the other steps below that and try to jump to that, and that's like, you can't do that because you're not going to be this person because you haven't done the steps to even get there. So yeah.
Well, and especially taking on that, Wayne, parents don't question me at all when I say, look, you've released your permission for me to talk to your child of minority age, but I will not share anything with you unless that child is physically or emotionally at risk. And then I'm going to, just like with a teacher in school, they have to report abuses and issues, whether they were actually in the room or not. But if they hear kids talking about it, they need to report that.
Yeah.
the limits of confidentiality are also extremely important to understand.
Let's just get on into it because you guys have already started the discussion.
Yeah.
Just how we roll.
Right. Yeah.
Just how we roll.
Right. So let's get into it. You guys can continue. It's 7:06, so we're gonna get started, and then you guys can invite people in because this is, as you see, a great discussion, right? So, guys, welcome to Let's Talk Men's Mental Health with Dr. Leslie Rogers. I am Dr. Leslie Rogers, owner of Mental Health Talk LLC and the widely talked about Mental Health Talk magazine. And you also have Dr. Lo Whiteman on here, who is the elite performance coach who works with elite athletes. And we have Wayne Lassane, who's also in the mental health space, who's growing his business. He and his wife have a business where she's a licensed clinician, and he's working toward getting his licensure, and they have their own business as well around couples work. So we present to you today episode 14. We've been on here for 14 weeks, and Renee and I had to go back, and I was like, wait a minute, has it been 14 weeks?
Yeah.
We've been on here for 14 weeks, and tonight is going to be part 1. We're going to have a part 2 series of this, but tonight is going to be the therapeutic space, what that looks like. Part 2, guys, will be what is part 2? The therapeutic space. Is therapy for me? I know a lot of guys might ask that question, is therapy for me? That'll be next week. And I might have a guest on next week as well. I'm waiting to confirm with him. But tonight is going to be all about building awareness around that therapeutic environment, what that looks like, from defining a psychologist, the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, to how many sessions are included in therapy, right? To the difference between individual versus group therapy. So we're going to kind of talk about a lot, and then we're going to add different information in there as well about different contexts of the therapy relationship. So this is just about awareness building, psychoeducation. So get your pens and pencil, and if you have any questions, please ask your questions, because this will be a great time to ask those questions. So first, let's start with the difference between psychiatrist and a psychologist. And I really wanted to talk about this because my family used to always go and tell everybody, oh, Leslie's a psychiatrist. Or actually, outside of my family, everybody would say, Leslie's a psychiatrist. And I would be like, no, I'm not a psychiatrist. So then what's the difference between a psychiatrist? Basically, they're 2 different disciplines, right? And 2 different degrees. I'm not a medical doctor. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor. They have a PhD, and they go to medical school, and they prescribe medication. So they take a lot of biology courses and a lot of medical courses in order to prescribe medication. A psychologist and counselors and other mental health professionals are not doctors. Now, let me take that back. We're doctors, but we're not medical doctors, right? We have a PhD, a doctorate in philosophy, or a PsyD, such I have a PsyD, which is a doctor of psychology. I chose not to, I do not do research. So I chose not to go to PhD route because I didn't want to focus on research base. I wanted to focus clearly on clinical. So I did not do a dissertation. I did a clinical research project, which is a different, right? Mm-hmm. So a psychiatrist, guys, prescribe medications. Psychologists do not. However, there was this debate as to whether psychologists would be approved to prescribe medication. And I think, and if I'm not mistaken, so don't quote me on this, but I think in the military, there are only a select few of psychologists who have gone through the degree process to prescribe. But it's only in the military, is from what I understand.
And those are under supervision, Leslie.
Huh?
Those are under supervision. So those are psychiatrists with a PhD.
But
Yeah.
They're under.
I don't know, but if it's I've been told that actual psychologists in the military, they have, and I'm not sure. I have to look that up and get back.
They have to be under supervision. They can make a referral, and then the psychiatrist that supervises them writes the script.
Okay.
And that's the same thing with a psychiatrist with a PhD who did not go on to be medical certified. They did not get an MD in addition to their PhD.
Okay.
Those are both of those have to be supervised to recommend prescription medication.
Gotcha.
Good to know, but it's only in the military, though.
Yeah, and there's also a limitation on the psychologists as relates to medication. No injectables. It's only oral medication for a psychologist in the military.
Okay.
You have to be supervised by an MD that writes the script for any injectables.
That's good.
Because those are psychotics.
Okay.
I mean, you can get some psychotics that are pills, but
that's
the injectables are the psychotics.
I'm going to have a psychiatrist actually come on here.
That would
and just
be
working with
nice.
on here. Yes, because there's other prescribers as well outside of psychiatry, such as psychiatric nurse practitioners can prescribe, and there's what do they call it? Pharmacists, psychopharmacologists can prescribe, but a lot of them can't prescribe controlled substances.
And based on the state will determine how much supervision they have to have too.
Yeah. So, but I'm going to have a psychiatrist come on because that's out of my wheelhouse, guys. I don't prescribe at all. Psychologists and therapists, we do talk therapy, right? Is what it's called.
Well, hopefully if we do our job, we don't have to have anybody on drugs.
Well, I don't know, because sometimes it's biology. Sometimes it's
I hope that's the fringe and not the mainstream.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes it's biology. So the main difference between a psychiatrist, again, and a psychologist is the discipline. There are two different disciplines. One is a medical doctor, one is not. One has prescribing authority, the other does not. I do not have prescribing authority. I am not a psychiatrist. Okay, and now other important aspects of this that I want to talk about. We have so many acronyms behind our name. What the hell does all this stuff mean, right? You go look for a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or you go look for you just want a therapist, you just want a counselor, but you don't know who to choose from because there's PhD, PsyD, LCPC, LCSW, and then you have all these acronyms. So I want to go through that really quick so that you guys can know what they stand for. So you have outside of psychologists. So psychologists has, again, we're doctors, so we have that PhD or PsyD. Then you have master's levels clinicians. They have their master's degree, such as a licensed professional counselors, LCP.
Social workers too.
Right, I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you have the licensed professional counselors. They have their master's degree, have advanced degrees in mental health treatment and assessment. And you'll either see an LCP-C, that means that they have their studies in clinical work, LPC-C, or you'll have LCSW, and that's the social workers. The social workers, licensed clinical social worker. Also does, therapy. Social workers, LMSW, licensed master of social work, or the more specialized LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, they do therapy as well. Again, to round it out, we all pretty much do the same work, but we have different disciplines, different training. Social workers go to school for different training than psychologists go to school for, right? Mm-hmm. Psychologists are the only ones who can do psychological testing. I do psychological testing. I test for ADHD, personality assessments, and I do psychological testing. You have to have your doctorate degree in order to do testing, or you have to do it under supervision. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have your doctorates, then you have your master's level, then you have more specialized components such as marriage and family therapy, drug and alcohol counselors, and things of that sort. But I wanted to really just explain what the acronyms are, what the letters are behind our names. You have your PhD, which is a doctor in philosophy, your PsyD, which is what I am, a doctor of psychology. Then you have your master's level counselors, and then there are other counselors too. But when you don't have your full degrees, you can practice under a licensed provider when you're in training. Like people go through school and they're getting their internships and their clinicals and stuff done, then you're practicing under supervision. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yep.
They're practicing under somebody who has a license, who oversees them and make sure they're, yeah.
Right.
I don't know if everybody who's watching knows that. But yeah.
So the moral of the story here is if you're looking for a counselor, it's okay to choose a PhD, a PsyD, a LPCP or LPC, or a licensed clinical social worker. It's okay. It's just different trainings that we've gone through. Okay. However, when you're looking for a professional, you want to make sure that they specialize in whatever it is you're looking for. Everybody doesn't.
That's important.
Everybody doesn't specialize in everything. For instance, I don't specialize in eating disorders. You know, just because I'm a mental health professional doesn't mean I specialize in eating disorders. A lot of psychologists and a lot of mental health professionals don't specialize in trauma. Some people might not specialize in depression or anxiety. A lot of folks might not specialize in anxiety. So you want to do your due diligence and ask questions when you're looking for a provider. A lot of people don't specialize in children. So you want to do your due diligence and make sure you ask questions around what's your population. So if you guys have looked in the magazine, right, in the back of the magazine, there are a resource listing. There's a resource listing. And in that resource listing, I have it detailed in a specific way that is listing providers out, and it talks about the population. So that when you call them, you already know they work with ages 7 years old and up, or if it's adult, or if it's child adult, right? You already know that, right? So you want to ask questions. You know if they work with trauma, if they do psychological testing, you know if they work with depression, anxiety, because it's all listed out in there. If you look at the back of the magazine when you're looking for providers, those are the questions that you want to ask.
I think, and Leslie, I think too, it's important for you, from your point, that look at the walls of the doctor's office, because every state requires that doctors have available for inquiry by patients what they're licensed to do. Like, for example, if you go to a physician's assistant, or if you go to a nurse practitioner and they write a script for you, or they've got meds on site and they can write the script and administer right there, they have to have a certificate that tells you that they are a prescriptive authority. And that's according to the NIH about that. So they should have the paperwork right on their wall or in a file that all you have to do is ask. Just show me. Just tell me, what are you able to give meds to my child in the classification of those meds? Because every state, as far as physician assistants and nurse practitioners, may vary as to what classification of meds they allow them to pass. Right. So it's important to ask those questions, just like you talked about.
Thank you. And again, I'm going to have a psychiatrist come on here because that's out of my wheelhouse. So, but yeah, this is just basic information that you guys should know.
And you can go on the NIH website and look up just like what we do for the references that you need. You have plenty of time to read. Go after it.
So next I have is the how many sessions are included in therapy, right? And that's a good question. How many sessions are included? So let me tell you, people can go to therapy from a week to a month to several months to years, right? Everyone is different. It all depends on what the need is of the individual. I start off with short-term therapy, anywhere up to 15 to 20 weeks or 15 to 26 weeks. And then it can go beyond, right? So let me give you guys some research here. So according to Howard and colleagues, investigated the relationship between the duration of psychotherapy and its outcomes. And they came up with two models, the dosage model, or dose effect model, there's a predictable relationship between number of therapy sessions and the probability of measurable improvement in symptoms. Meaning, how many sessions does a person need in order to have improvement, some type of improvements, right? And this model predicts that 50% of therapy clients can be expected to exhibit a clinically significant improvement in symptoms by 6 to 8 sessions. By 6 to 8 sessions, you should see some type of improvement. And I do see that. You know, I do see that. But, you know, between 6 to 8 sessions, 75% by 26 sessions, and 85% by 52 sessions. And then they have this model called the phase model, right? Psychotherapy outcomes can be described in terms of 3 phases. The initial remoralization phase occurs during the first few sessions of the clinical relationship and is characterized by an increase in hopefulness. So people come to therapy, the first few sessions, you gain hope. You know, see there's hope in, you know, some people come to therapy and say, oh, I'm never going to get better. But after a few sessions, you should see some type of hope, right? Some people feel hopefulness. This is followed by remediation phase, which occurs during the next 16 sessions and involves a reduction in symptoms, right? The final rehabilitation phase involves unlearning troublesome, maladaptive, habitual behaviors and establishing new ways of dealing with various aspects of life, problematic relationship patterns, faulty work habits, and trouble causing personal attitudes. So this is saying that by 6 to 8 weeks, you should see some type of improvement in therapy. And by 26 weeks, and especially 52 weeks, you're going to see some improvement. So again, it varies depending on what the presentation is. Like a person can come in. I have had people come in just to talk, and they're just there for like maybe 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
I have had people come in with more severity in presentation and have been with me for like 6 months, 3 to 6 months, right? I've had somebody, now me, again, you have to talk to the provider about what their orientation is, because my goal isn't to have somebody in therapy for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
My goal is to teach people skills so that they can learn what they need to learn and then apply it on their own. And even that, because what happens is patients or clients will become dependent on me or on their providers. And then they'll think that I can never leave. So my approach to therapy is teaching them the skills they need and then building them up to terminate and let them fight on their own. And then if they need to come back for boosters or come back to help with something, you know, then we do booster sessions every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, something like that, instead of every week, right? Start off at every week and then slowly transition to every other week, etc. So, but the idea isn't to stay in therapy for long term. Now there are patients that have been in therapy for years, for, you know, 2, 3 years. And, you know, again, it depends on the need of the individual. Again, the longest I've had somebody in treatment was up to a year and a half, 2 years. And usually, and we're going to get into this next, usually, again, my model is I don't expect people to be in therapy for the rest of their lives, but it depends on the presentation and the need of the person and the clinician's orientation. Right. Right. So another question is the therapy process. Okay, so let's talk about the therapy process really quickly. Right. The therapy process includes an intake. You become engaged, you go out there, you make phone calls, see if somebody possibly meets your need. They'll do an intake. An intake is similar to a triage. It varies depending on what setting you're in. Private practice is called an intake. If you're in a hospital setting, it might be called a triage. Private practice might even be called a consult, right?
Yes.
So you go into the therapy office, you set up a consult or intake or a triage if it's hospital, and we get information from you. Background information, presenting problems, any family histories of mental illness, because as we know, some mental illnesses are hereditary, right? So we get background information and all of that good stuff on you, and we see what the problem is, then we set you up for therapy. With testing, it's similar. With testing, psychological testing, you get background information, especially for ADHD testing. ADHD testing, we get information from the families, specifically the parents and the school, because you want to show that the behaviors are in 2 or more settings.
Yeah.
Inattentiveness, hyperactivity, impulsivity, you want to show this in multiple settings. So you have to get information from the parents and the school.
Yeah.
Right. So you get that intake done. And then if it's for therapy, after the intake, you come into the first session. The first couple sessions, guys, even I would say the first few sessions are rapport building. Rapport building happens throughout the relationship. You're building rapport, you're building trust, you're building that therapeutic relationship, which is really, really important in this process, because you want to be able to know that you can trust me as your provider and that you're going to feel safe, that I'm going to create a safe space for you to basically come in and take off your clothes if you, right? Because, well, yeah. Because, that vulnerability makes you feel like you're nude in a sense, right? And it's uncomfortable, especially.
That's a metaphor, everybody. That's a metaphor.
It is.
Metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, I don't expect anybody to come in and take off their clothes. But
I have had that happen.
Yeah.
That's another question and story entirely.
Yeah, but it's important to, it's vulnerability can be scary, and you come into this space and you don't know what to expect. It's an anxiety provoking within itself, right? So it's my job to help you to feel comfortable, and that's by talking. So the way I do things, I go in as Leslie first, and then I slowly integrate Dr. Rogers.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that from the very beginning, from the moment you walk in that room, from the moment you do the intake, we're doing therapy, but you just don't know it. Wayne, go ahead.
No, I just think that to go back to what you said, I think it's important to let everybody know that in the beginning, when you're seeking out a therapist, it's your opportunity to interview the person who you're working with, as well as the therapist to interview you as well, to see if you guys are even a fit. I think that a lot of people don't understand that part. I think that now when you're going for more extreme things, like if you're going through a mental breakdown, having like extreme things like that, then yes, you got to work with who is available for you. But when you're looking for a therapist, somebody to work with, back to your point, like make sure you're doing your due diligence, asking all your questions, as well as the therapist as well doing their due diligence, because they may refer you out, because you may come in and think they're great, but they may feel like, you know what, I'm gonna refer you out because there's things that I just, don't feel like we would match it. And so I think that everybody just needs to know that it's an interview process in the beginning to even see, and that's how important it is. If we want to actually get to work, we want to make sure we're working with somebody who you just said that we can feel comfortable enough with to come in and just get naked and take off all our exterior emotions and defenses and all the things that just keep us protected in society. We want to let those walls down when we come in, so we can get the help that we actually really need.
Exactly. And to that point, when you guys come in, he's absolutely right. You want to make sure that they're a good fit, but you have to make sure. A lot of people come into the environment, especially people with traumatic histories, come into the environment with preconceived biases. So you have to be careful not to allow your biases to get in the way, to interfere of that therapeutic relationship, to let the process happen without thinking the worst. So then, because a lot of people therapy hop, I call it hopping.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think what we've said so far, I want to come back to the intake form, because there's some paradigms that exist that should be changed about the intake form, and give the prospective patient, client, wherever you're at in your process of your practice, a chance to choose different formats to share, so that they don't feel like boxed into a paper format. Many of them are so into videotaping themselves. They do kinds of reels on Instagram and all this kind of stuff. And in many cases, that can help us avoid saying something that's a trigger in the session, which we didn't know it was, because the intake form didn't give us any background. So many times the intake form for me is a videotape. And I'll ask for more information from the referring source many times is an organization and not necessarily the individual, or it's a manager or an agent or a combination of that and family members. So I try to get as many three-dimensional input forms, if you will. Eventually, it's a file, that goes in the computer. But I have really gained a lot of preparatory insight to help me know in advance to a black hole that I might step into before it happens. There's no guarantee, okay? Yeah. We all get surprised. But I think asking for and delivering different modalities and methods to get the information is extremely important. Also, the presumption that somebody comes in, to Wayne's point about, you're interviewing them too. You're interviewing the therapist, the coach, the counselor, and that's true, absolutely. But the condition of the person is a huge influence on the capabilities of them interviewing you. So as counselors, therapists, and coaches, we need to be as good at empathetic listeners as we are talkers in those first meetings, so that we can discover, okay, what's the reality here? I see my intake, but what's the reality of this person? You guys are spoiled because I don't have an office many times. It's on a field of green or a floor of wood, and it's happening real time. That tent you see on the sidelines of NFL games, where it's usually for broken bones and contusions, I go in there too. When it's not a big deal on the field. It's guys that just came off a position change, and they say, man, I'm not here. I need to talk. So we pop the tent up, go into the tent, and manage it. So it's in the moment. So therapy is not necessarily a formalized therapeutic session. In fact, I think it shouldn't have to be. Right. If you need it, you need it. And you need a way to reach out and call somebody. And too often we don't have enough, and we're going to talk about contact sources for information and resources, but we really don't have enough. And those we do have many times don't get advertised because of what we talked about earlier. People are afraid to admit, I called 988. I picked up the email or the website. I went to the website. They hesitate to do that. And we need to destigmatize that paradigm.
Right.
All great points. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go back because Lo, you just had me go. I want to go back really quickly. When we talk about the triage and the intake, now we do have a triage where you fill out all the paperwork, your insurance information, and all of that information, and then they set you up for the intake. So the first step is a triage. Then you have your intake, and then you have your therapy or whatever else is going to happen. So you have your triage where you come into the office, you call and make an appointment. They get your payment information, your insurance. You go through all of your background information, et cetera. Then they set you up for your intake. Your intake is that in-depth process where we gather information to see what's going on, any family history, and things of that sort. And then you have your therapy after that. So next is the difference between individual and group therapy, which is a really great question. Individual therapy is more personable, and is one type of psychotherapy. It involves a trained professional helping a single individual work through the therapeutic process. Again, it's more interpersonal. You have that one-on-one relationship. And I look at it as being the baseline of learning about yourself, the baseline about being able to learn skills, effective skills to work your way up to being in a group or in other settings. But then you have people that are able to go into a group first, as opposed to going into therapy first. A group approach might be a first, like people with anxiety, folks with anxiety. Sometimes instead of therapy, I might refer them straight to a group, depending on what the issue is, right? A group, on the other hand, involves a group of individuals, all of whom is treated in the same way by the therapist. And I wanted to write down some advantages of being in a group fosters a development of communications, social skills and results in individuals, being able to learn to accept criticism for others, and also have other advantages too. But building on those interpersonal relationships and being able to bounce things off of each other. If you're in a group, it validates experiences, is able to normalize experiences with your peers. It teaches you how to build trusting relationships. I mean, groups have many benefits. So does individual. Individual therapy has many benefits as well. And I pulled up some. Individual benefits are gaining a better understanding of yourself, learning how to handle emotions, which you can learn how to handle emotions in groups too, identifying underlying causes of symptoms, providing coping strategies and managing symptoms, facilitating lifestyle changes, benefits of individual therapy, benefits of group as well, are again fostering that relationship, being able to bounce ideas off of each other, being able to support each other, learning how to accept support systems. A lot of substance abuse and recovery therapy is via group.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of anxiety, they have a lot of anxiety groups as well. That's really helpful for reducing anxiety. I do a lot of mindfulness meditation and relaxation via group. I do anger management via group. I do anxiety, stress management via group. I do anxiety via group. And sometimes group is used as a step down approach, which means that you go through your sessions. Remember, my motto is you don't stay in individual therapy for the rest of your life. I would hope not. So say like you get to a point where our goals have been met, and it's a scary termination when you're talking, which is next. Termination, when you're talking about termination, is pretty scary because now we've developed this relationship and there's a bit of dependency there. So now we're talking about ending possibly, right?
Yeah.
So the goals have been met, then what's next, right? Group. Sometimes I will refer to group as a step down approach to continue what we've learned in session, but then start learning how to work with those in a group environment so that you can foster those relationships and work on relationships as to what we've been taught, especially with trauma backgrounds, when you have a lot of ruptures in thinking and ruptures in relationships, and that trust and safety and things of that. A group would be really helpful towards regaining power and control to keep yourself safe and trust and things of that sort.
Yeah. And I love groups just for the simple fact that you get to go there and maybe someone has had a similar experience to you, and you get to see how they've been able to manage and get through it. And maybe you can borrow some of those tools that they have and use them for yourself. And again, you get to see that you're not alone and you're by yourself. And now you get to build relationships with these people who've gone through similar things. So now you have that companionship type of feeling. And I don't mean through trauma, like a trauma bond. I mean like through actual like friendship and like, oh wow, like man, I would love to talk to you about these things. And just again, another space to not feel as like it's one-on-one and you're going through this, this very intentional, very direct like surgery, but it's more so like a environment where you get to hear other people, you get to see how they process things, you get to process your things within this group, and you feel supported. So yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
And in my world, group therapy becomes a visit with the injured. Because they're the ones that aren't playing, so they get to go, get together and talk about teamwork
exactly.
And their rehab process and all that kind of stuff. And there's anxiety associated with that physical trauma. So I had a young man the other day say to me, he says, Coach, I don't need to go to the group session. I go, why is that? He says, well, I've got Instagram. I go, what do you mean you got Instagram? He says, yeah, I go on, I chat with a bunch of people that are injured, all that I know on other teams. And I said, really? And how is that facilitated? What's the guided structure that you have for understanding the questions? Or maybe is there somebody poking at one of your friends trying to get them to give you an answer on a question you ask, but you're not getting that answer, or you're not going deep enough into the answer? He goes, oh, I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you this. What was the largest amount of time spent on what topic in your last group session? He said, oh, it was about one of my buddies had a blind date. We talked about that. I go, oh, Oh, good. So you didn't talk about how you're feeling about your knee and whether or not you're going to get back on the field in the 4 weeks that they said you were going to get back to, and how you're pissed off about that you don't think it's going to happen and nobody's giving you the truth. That's anxiety, my friend. That's why you need to go to my group session to talk that stuff through. But
Right.
that's also, tongue in cheek, but it's about people making up their own story in their head about why they don't go seek out these coping mechanisms, affirmations of success, thinking about really what it is about somebody else's success that I could learn from. So I've had the other side of convincing people, yeah, you get it, and that's why you should be in it.
Yes.
Because what you know could be something as a solution for someone else, and vice versa. So I had a brief success with that young man and getting him away from his Instagram group. But social media is giving us challenges with the younger people having a mindset and being mindful of the benefits of therapeutic processes without emojis. They speak in figures. They speak in short representative statements that don't really get to the root and the rationale that should motivate them to participate. It's a cop-out. It's a camouflage. And they really don't know it because it's so common.
Right.
And I just want to say real quick, so to people out there, Instagram and TikTok and YouTube is not therapy.
Oh, and also Clubhouse is not therapy either, guys.
Yeah, it's not therapy.
A lot of times I'm on Clubhouse, and a lot of people will call themselves coaches and will talk about, oh my gosh, they have people disclosing suicidal everything on it. And it scares me because I'm like, oh my gosh, when they hang up from Clubhouse, who's there to help them process all of that that stuff that they talked about? Woo, that's another thing, guys. So
and I want to make sure everybody understands, we're not taking shots at
no.
social media. We're just saying that's not going to get you down the road of supportive behaviors that help you level up to a different place than where you're at. It may soothe you for the moment because you think you have like-minded people in that group for there, but the minute it shuts off, it's gone.
Yeah.
There's no lasting engagement for you to carry on. We're trying to give you actual resources and solutions that you can manage on your own and really succeed at moving it forward.
And maybe we need to have that as a discussion, because social media, I think that now, let me tell you, I've been on Clubhouse, and I think that Clubhouse is a good support system for many people, right? But you just have to be mindful that it's not therapy, and you have to be careful as it flows, because again, like any other source, when you shut down this phone or shut down whatever method platform you're using, you're alone, and you're not further processing that. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're safe. So okay, guys.
Yeah, and real quick, and I love social media. And again, people have to know that on social media, what they're doing is they're introducing you to concepts, and they're introducing you because they want the business. They introduce you. Introduction is not the actual work. They want you to reach out to them, and so social media works great because it gets you to give you language to some things that you may have been feeling. So now that you have that, now what do you do with that? That's the part that we're speaking to. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to confidentiality, because I really want to get through this before, because this is important, and this is one of the important aspects of this that I want to talk about, because I often get a lot of questions around confidentiality, or great questions. So confidentiality is being able to discuss certain material and certain information about yourself in a space without fearing that it's going to go somewhere else, being released to other people, right? So the first thing you're told when you go to therapy, everything is confidential, right? And which is true, everything is confidential. However, there are limits. Limits to confidentiality means that there are laws in place where we have to report. As psychologists and as licensed mental health professionals, we're bound by reporting, right? Even as non-licensed professionals. If you're going to school or in spaces where you do therapy, and you're talking about, vulnerable vulnerable information and talk about sensitive information, there's confidentiality laws in place, right? Confidentiality up to age 18. When you come into therapy and your parents bring you to therapy, your parents have a right to know up until age 18 what's going on. The way I do things, I start less extreme to extreme. If I have a child, anybody 18 or younger, in my office, I always let them know that, if you say anything to me that I think your parents should know, you and I will talk about that. And I usually get the child to disclose it to their parents. And I haven't had any instance yet where I had to break confidentiality except for one time. And that was because the child's parents had left while the person was in therapy with me, had suicidal intentions, and I couldn't talk to the parents, so I had to do a involuntary commitment. Thank you is, Dr. Rogers, I don't like, I believe that we should talk about it and that the child should always talk to the parents first. In front of me, we can talk together. I always put the power in the child's hand, but confidentiality, that's a limit. You have to talk to the parents if a child comes in and talk to you about information that is detrimental to their safety, their life, and oftentimes unprotected sex as a minor and other things, drug use, substance use, and other things. Parents probably should know that. So if you can, therapists out there, clinicians out there, try to give their child power to talk to the parents about that, even if it's in front of you, right? So up to 18, another limit. So the limits are thoughts of suicide, homicidal thoughts, elder abuse, right? And then court-ordered cases, right? So when you talk about suicidal ideation, let's talk about this really quickly. And I had a question about this, and I will say this really quick. We might go over time, but I'm just gonna say this really quick. I was in Clubhouse and I was really hurt because I was kicked out of a room that I was in because a person asked about, if I disclose that I'm suicidal, will I be hospitalized? No one in the room answered that question. And when I answered the question, I was told that it was inappropriate. They didn't talk about suicide in that room. Then I was like, well, then you need to change the subject to the room, because then you're going to get people. It was on, well, I'm not going to say the name of the room. But so my response is, that's an excellent question, because a lot of people fear going to therapy and disclosing that they're suicidal because they think they're going to be involuntarily committed. And let me tell you how this works. There has to be acuity, there has to be a risk to harm, and there has to be a plan in place. A lot of people have passive suicidal thoughts, which means, yes, I get up in the morning and sometimes I wish God would take me away. Sometimes I wish that I would not live. Sometimes this life will be better without me. But that doesn't mean you're going to kill yourself, right? It just means that you're going through so much emotional pain and you're overwhelmed, and maybe death might be the better option. But you don't have a plan, right? So that doesn't warrant hospitalization. What it does warrant is further assessment into what's going on, right? So now,
Leslie, to your point, let me
hold on, Lo. Let me finish this thought. So, so when you now you have the passive thought, I don't want to live anymore, to Dr. Rogers, when I go home, I have a weapon sitting on my dresser every night I go home. Or Dr. Rogers, when I go home, I have a bottle of pills. So now you have a plan in place, which means that at some point there's an intent. There's at some point, you've thought out a plan and you've thought about how you would do it, right? So now you're not only actively thinking about it, you're actively going through with the act. Now, if there is a situation where I feel that hospitalization may be warranted, like a 24 to 48 hour assessment, evaluation is due, then I always try to get my clients or patients to voluntarily admit themselves into the hospital to make sure they're going to, because my my job is to keep you safe. And I have to make sure I let everybody know that even in the beginning, because what happens is, even if it comes down to a point where I have to involuntarily commit, it ruptures relationships. So you have to know, as a psychologist and as a mental health provider, our job is to keep you safe, right? We may have the best therapeutic relationship ever, but our job is to keep you safe. And if it comes down to us putting you in a hospital to keep you safe, then that's what we have to do, right? So I wanted to say that because there are, when we make that decision, it's a imminent risk or harm that when you leave our office, you're at risk for harming yourself. And we have to step in to, and that's, so that's a limit. Suicidal thoughts, right? Suicidal with a plan. So again, it has to be acuity. It has to be, which means that imminent harm or risk. You have intent to follow through with it, right? And so the bottom line is to keep you safe. Another, homicidal thoughts. If you're having thoughts of going out harming somebody else, right? And Dr. Lowe, I'm not sure if you heard about this, the Tarasoff duty to warn. So, okay, back in 1969, University of California, Berkeley, student was murdered by someone, and her parents sued the psychiatrist, and this is just a long story short. Her parents sued the psychiatrist and a police department because I think they had knowledge that this person had disclosed that he was going to harm this woman, and they didn't disclose because of confidentiality. The psychiatrist didn't tell, and the police officer didn't warn the victim either. So she was murdered. So now there's a law in place called Tarasoff warning, where it says that if we have reason to believe somebody is at danger, that one of our patients are going to go out and actively harm someone or kill someone, we have the right to warn that person.
Yes.
We have to warn that person. Now, an exception to that, like if you're in prison, right, then you have to get prison officials involved and things of that sort. But so there's different laws and stuff in place for that. But the gist is, if we have any idea that somebody is going to go out and harm somebody, we have a duty to warn. Now, questions that I get around that is HIV and AIDS. Do we have a duty to warn if someone is HIV positive or AIDS positive, HIV AIDS positive? Do we have, and it's having unprotected sex with people, do we have a duty to warn? Now that the question, the answer to that is, it's state by state laws vary. Some states will require you to either report it to CDC, Center for Disease Control. Some states will require you to warn, and some states do not. So if you're a clinician on here listening to this, you need to read up on your state laws and understand what your state laws are. And if you have, because most of the time states do not require you to, that's breach of confidentiality, and you cannot disclose that information. So, and that's an excellent question, because it's by, and many of the stuff is by state laws. Child sexual abuse, we have to report it. We are required by law to report it. Elder abuse, child sexual abuse. Now, if an adult came into my office and said that she was abused, then it would be up to her to report. If a child came into the office, yes, I would be bound to report. However, and there's no statutory limitation laws. So if an adult was abused as a child and they feel that they want to come forward and go to authorities and report, we saw that with Bill Cosby, right? I think a few of those girls were minors in that case. And as an adult, they went back and, reported the allegedly abuse to the authorities, and, he was prosecuted. So there's no statute of limitation. And there might be other laws to that are outside of my scope of understanding, but to gist of it, there's no statute of limitation to child sexual abuse if it took place when you were a child. Even if you're an adult, you can go back and look to prosecute. So these are limits. Other limits I like to talk to people about is when you're in hospital settings, such as a military hospital or government settings. You have military hospital. You know, we have systems in there that the doctors and all of us providers and everybody can, you know, look at and things of that sort. You know, there's limits to confidentiality. You know, anybody that's working on your case can look at your, you know, files. Anybody, your treatment team, your interdisciplinary team. I was the interdisciplinary team lead for a BHIP team in the VA. And just know that, you know, when you have a treatment team, they all have access to your records. So when we're writing notes in the records, you know, everybody on your treatment team have access to those records. Law enforcement, again, with law enforcement, you have employee assistance program. For most of them, they are bound by confidentiality just like we are. So confidentiality applies there. However, there's limits, such as, again, when you're weaponized and you're carrying weapons, there are limits to confidentiality if it impedes on the safety of you or, you know, someone else. If there's substance abuse, substance use, or drugs, or, you know, other stuff that can impact your performance when carrying a weapon and things of that sort, you have to look into your organization and see what those limits are. Now, the best thing to do for you guys when you're talking about confidentiality is make sure you sign a release of information. Make sure you sign a release of information. A release of information allows you to tell us who you want, and that's medical across the board. A release of information allows you to tell us who you want us to share information with, if we had to share information. Or like, for instance, if you come into my office with your mom and you're of age, I'll say, is it okay for her to come in here with you? Or if you want me to share information outside, if you're an adult, with your husband or children or others, we sign release of information so you can let me know what you want them to know and what you want them to be in here on, and etc. So confidentiality is huge. It's very important in the therapy environment and a relationship, but there are limits. And the limits make sense though, right? The limits of confidentiality make sense. You know, again, sexual abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, suicidal thoughts with a plan, court order, a subpoena, no. It has to be a court order in order to release records. A subpoena, psychologists can claim privilege and not share information. However, if it's a court order, we have to share. So most of the time, I don't write, and a lot of clinicians, a lot of us do not write a lot of stuff in reports because it's, you know, if we get court order, we have to hand that stuff over. Yeah. So some stuff, if I think it's important to your treatment, then yes, I will write it down. But if it's not relevant or important to your treatment and your treatment goals that we're talking about, then I don't write that stuff down. We don't really keep records like that, you know, because of confidentiality and HIPAA laws, right? You guys have heard of HIPAA laws, right? To protect your rights as well. So please, I encourage you all that's on this video to know your rights as a client, know your rights, your confidentiality laws, know your state laws as it pertains to reporting and things like that, because it's really, really important. And okay, so that was a lot of information to take in. I'm going to let you guys talk because I've talked enough. I will say referrals. You know, a lot of times we get referrals and we do report back to referrals. If somebody refer you to me for psychological testing, that test, once it's done, that report goes back to whoever referred you. If they refer you for therapy, then make sure, because you've already signed that release of information with that party. So if they contact me for information, I'll have you sign a release too, and then that information is shared back to them. So just know, you know, who you're sharing information with. Yeah. Ask questions because it's really important, so that if something is shared, you don't go back and say, wait a minute, I didn't know that person or that organization, or they were told this. I didn't give that permission. But then when you look back, you might have a release in place. So I know that's a lot of information.
piece of information at the bottom, National Mental Illness Association, great resource. There's an 800 number there for you. Everybody, I hope you had a great session with us today. I know I got to get going to another meeting, but I want to say that next week we've got the follow-up to this, and then are we gonna, Leslie? We're gonna talk about our schedule for the summer.
Yeah, so you and Wayne get together about that. So I'll email you guys once Wayne and I jump off of here.
Awesome. Have a great rest of the evening, everybody, and a wonderful rest of the week.
Okay, you too. Thank you so much.
All right.
Wayne, hold on for a second. So resources, I just want to give you guys some resources really quickly. So resources inside of government organizations and other organizations are EAP. EAP are strong resources in government agencies and law enforcement agencies. They have employee assistance programs if you need to be engaged in therapy. And then, so EAP guys do short-term counseling and referral. They don't do long-term therapy. So you guys need to know that employee assistance programs do not do long-term therapy. Their goal is short-term therapy and referral. So they get what they need to know what you need, and then they refer you out to the community. So you have your community resources. College counseling centers are good for college students. If you don't know, please get engaged with your college. Every college should have a college counseling center that offers therapy. And I will, going back to confidentiality, we said confidentiality in a therapy environment was 18 or younger. But when you go to college, let me tell you, when your kids go to college, they don't share information with you. 18 and over, you have to get a release of information. They treat the kids as if they're adults and they don't share. Even if you're paying their bills, they won't share information with you. So you have to make sure your child signs a release if you want information shared with you in college. You have 988 is that new number for mental health crises. And you have internal and external services. Each state, guys, have a mental health resource line. Every state has one. You just have to do your research and find out the phone number for that. If I would recommend that everybody had like a little card for their family or families, and either up on a refrigerator, or every family member had a card and had crises numbers on it for mental health. Very great resources to have. Next week, we're going to have part 2 of this is therapy for me? A lot of questions are therapy for me. How do you know if therapy is for you or not? How do you know if you should be engaged or not, right? So we're going to talk about that next week.
I feel like we all could use some therapy, by the way. I think, but yes.
Wayne, is there anything you wanted to add? I know I talked this whole time.
No. I think you covered it. I think you covered a lot. I think it's very informative. I think that it's a lot of information today. I hope that people had a pen and paper with them and can kind of write some of the stuff down. And obviously, if you have any questions, please, don't hesitate to instant DM us or message us, offline. Also, I'm looking forward to next week so we can kind of, it won't be so information heavy in the sense of just all the resources and all this kind of stuff and all the terminology and names, but just more of a free flowing, conversations you guys are welcome to engage with. That's next week. So yeah.
Right. Does anyone have any questions before we jump off about what was talking? It's a lot of information, I know. And I'll review some of it next week, but an hour goes by so quickly.
It does.
We supposed to only be on here for 30 minutes, but
that
ain't
the old format. The new format is an hour.
I know. So, okay, so we're going to jump off if there's no questions. Dr. Lowell put up a phone number on there. I hope I will have this guest on next week. He's amazing. He's going to come and talk about anxiety, his journey with anxiety and OCD. Mm. So I'm hoping to have him on next week. I'm just waiting for him to confirm. So, but I'll let you guys know about that. Okay.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, if there's nothing else, we will jump off and we will see you next Monday, same time.
Yep.
It's part 2. The therapeutic space is therapy for me. Is therapy for me. Yeah. So I'll talk to you then.
All right.
See you, Wayne.
All right. Bye.
Bye.